There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind.
It was basically a cube with inside of a sphere where the points of the cube were touching outside of the sphere.
Roger. There's troubleshooting machines out here.
So this isn't anything that just is limited to the United States. It's a worldwide phenomenon.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to That UFO Podcast. It's a breakdown. We're recording this on the 12th of March, 2022. Joining me, as always, is Dan. Hi.
Hi. We've been doing this for a while now. You always give me such nice intros, and yeah, I think maybe we can just skip those now.
I was going to say welcome to the podcast, but yeah, that's for guests. That's for guests. So lots of little bits to cover within this one. We were going to record this the other day, but there's been lots going on, and I'm busy, you're busy, and we've managed to get to it today on a lovely Saturday evening here in the UK. And do you know what? For the first time, and I don't know why I've not done this before, I asked some of the listeners on Twitter and various platforms. That's a lie. I said I just used Twitter. I should have used others. Check me checking myself. Is there anything they wanted us to cover? And a couple of people quickly got back with a load of things, so we'll tear through those later on. But there's a few bits of news that are definitely worth covering. So if there is stuff you want us to cover, folks, within the breakdowns, we do try and keep them weekly when there's stuff to talk about, because otherwise, when there's not a lot to talk about, people make stuff up. So what we'll start to do is it's very true. Yep, that's one of the things we need to cover later on in a way. New James Fox documentary, Dan, has been announced obviously some time ago. Very exciting update from James Fox. The documentary on the Virginia case in Brazil is going to be called Moment of Contact. And from James Fox's socials, if you're not on the social medias, you won't have seen this. He said, we have worked tirelessly for months to produce a documentary in record time on the famous or infamous 1996 Virginia UFO incident. I'm proud to say that we are just days away from having a powerful and compelling rough cut. It's called Moment of Contact and will be released late this year. Thanks to all of you for your continued support. #Virginia, #UFO. It's also been picked up by 1091 Pictures for distribution. No dates yet on release, but like James said, it'll be later this year once it's finished up, and he's going to be on the pod to talk about that when the time is right. I've been in contact with James, and as soon as he feels he wants to come on and have any kind of conversations, but I get James as a father. You know, I always appreciate if they're parents that come on the show and stuff, and he spent a lot of time away from his young son when he was away filming the documentary, and he is tearing through the work, if you keep up to date with his socials, to get this thing ready as quickly as he is. So very much looking forward to that. And when James was on with myself, Dan, he mentioned people shouldn't expect this to be the Phenomenon 2. That is going to be its own piece. The Phenomenon 2 will be coming out. This is very much taking a magnifying glass to a particular case and really dissecting it and getting involved, and I don't doubt this will be a very, very good piece to watch. Very well made, of course, as anything James does is.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing about this case is that there's actual kind of, you know, as the name implies, there's actual kind of contact and interaction between beings and people. So after James played so loosely with that idea in the phenomena, I'm very intrigued to see how he presents such a landmark case, really.
I think in my head, I always think of the best kind of footage in any movie of alien contact, or like what should be genuine, was in Signs with Joaquin Phoenix, you know, M. Night Shyamalan, when they actually see, I believe it's in Brazil, isn't it? When they
in the children's birthday party,
yeah,
that's right.
It's a children's birthday party in Brazil, and they say, look at this footage, it's disturbing, and the handheld camera shakes as it shows you like a being just pass by the alleyway. And that's right, the first time in the film you see one of these things, kinda, and it's really, really well done. And for me, that's kind of what I have in my head with this Virginia case. So I'm looking forward to seeing if that kind of mirrors up in the same way when I first read the Harry Potter books, that, you know, I had all these ideas of what they would look like and what the places would be like. So I look forward to James kind of bringing that to life with the cast and crew that he's put together.
Yeah, absolutely. He's always so tasteful with his recreations. There's no overly dramatic music. It's not very ancient aliens. It's more kind of probably what the person experienced in the moment. And yeah, I love that he always takes that human angle because it really is important what it does to us.
Yes, looking forward to that very much. I don't want to be too pleasant about James or anyone on this pod because a recent Apple review, which was 1 star, called us propaganda, and I sent that to Dan today, didn't I?
Propaganda.
I sent the screenshot. I was like, "Yep, we're now propaganda." So yeah, from the shed, I'm creating a propaganda piece. But yeah, so if you are on Apple, that would be great if you could leave a 5 star review to counteract that horrible 1 star review. But yeah, I did
I
laugh.
guess for anyone that's read The Three Body Problem, they're probably remembering right now that there's a group of people that are kind of readying the rest of the human race for this arrival of the other race. And yeah, I guess you could count us amongst those people because we're embracing the idea and talking about it.
Yeah, we'll get to the conspiracy stuff later on. Next up, Dan, just a really quick one, but it came out yesterday as we record this, or 2 days ago. George Knapp, through his 8 News Now website, where he works in Vegas. The headline was, "A former CIA specialist reveals new secrets of Area 51, including its real name." This is from the title of a new book by T.D. Barnes, CIA Station D, which is all about the history of what we know as Area 51. Apparently, this new name has come out. One of many names that Area 51 goes by, as people may or may not know. But yes, CIA Station D was also a name, which is pretty cool to hear these things coming out. It's something, to be honest, I'll pick up the book myself. While it's not necessarily UFO related, it's about a very famous piece of UFO lore or ufology, UFO history, whatever you want to call it. I'll need to catch up with that interview anyway myself. But what did you think of that one, Dan?
Real interesting. It speaks to different things having different names depending on who you speak to, and it's pertinent to the UAP issue in another way, I think, because when you have people like Black Vault, John Greenwald, he has a name. He will use FOIA to get information. Now, with FOIA, you need to be very specific in your requests. So if you don't know a term for UFOs that they're using, perhaps you wouldn't be able to get that piece of information. So it speaks to that side of things. That what we have: UAP, OVNI, UFOs. They're just some of them. In Colombia, we experienced spirits, lights, all these other things, and they're all UFO reports. So the information that we want could just be stashed somewhere and with a very strange name used for the phenomenon that none of us has ever thought of.
Yeah, it looks a good piece if you've got any interest in the history of the building and the area, because I think when you've got an interest in UFOs, you hear Area 51 and you think straight away, usually alien bodies, crashed craft, Independence Day when they go out there to the desert and they've got the working crafts, and is it under the ground? Is there stuff in the mountains? And Groom Lake, S4. But looks like to be a really well put together piece. TD Barnes is part of a group called the Roadrunners. I hadn't actually heard of that before, but it was a group who famously worked at that building, at that designated location, Area 51, who encouraged the government to come out and give more details and stuff about it as well. Even though it was in the late 80s, it kind of became official. They talk about how the Russians knew about it in the 50s and 60s, like with their various spy craft and spy planes and things like that they were using as well. So it looks like a really interesting book. So I'm probably going to pick that one up myself and have a flick through it. So yeah, definitely look forward to that one. Dan, you're up next with a US legislation update.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of movement. So what's known as the Appropriations Act has kind of started coming through the House, and it has now been sent to Biden. So we're just waiting on him to sign it. But there are two specific UAP-related things in here, as reported by Dee Johnson at Dee Johnson on Twitter, I believe. Go follow him. He's great with this stuff. But yeah, there are two key things that are being added to the UAP language that we saw passed over Christmas. So the language basically reads, or the pertinent language reads, the Director of National Intelligence and the Secretary of Defense shall jointly require that each element of the intelligence community and component of the Department of Defense with data relating to unidentified aerial phenomena make such data available immediately. And this is the new bit. Immediately to the UAPTF, or the successor entity, and to the National Air and Space Intelligence Center. That's NASIC. NASIC is Air Force. And They're based out of Wright-Patterson, which people familiar with UFO law will know that's where crashes and all these recoveries meant to be taken to study. So we could see a number of things come of this. Basically, the Air Force might be stepping into the conversation. It opens the door to defense contractors to get involved now in the UAP work through NASIC. And in the legislation passed over Christmas, there was a requirement in there that it wouldn't just be that the UAPTF observe the UAP phenomena and investigate it. It's that they're trying to exploit what they're witnessing. So NASIC would play a key part in exploiting that technology. So it's really great that they're involved. The other part is that these the committees that are asking for all of this, they actually want reports every 90 days from it passing, whereas the previous legislation went through, we had kind of biannual reports, 2 a year. Now we're looking at every 90 days. So once this passes, you can start counting down your 90 days, and then you know that your officials are receiving classified 90-day reports from the UAPTF. Like I say, it's classified, so we might not hear about that unless they speak about it.
I'm going to play devil's advocate again on this, and I've done this before on this subject, but is it not fair to say that in a period of war, which we're now in, unfortunately, where the US, while it's not directly involved in the war, almost every country is indirectly involved in at least some way with what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, UAPs are, as much as anything, can be tied into drones and other craft that may operate, which the US doesn't know too much about. Would it not make sense that this looks like it is being sped up because there may be some secret tech within this that's worth them finding out about in a kind of time of heightened tension? Or is that unfair?
No, I think that's completely fair. There's going to be all sorts of technologies behind the door at NASIC and all these technology development places that could come in handy. And unidentified aerial phenomena, or the research of, could provide a good open door to revealing some of these technologies and maybe the crazier things that inspired them. Who knows? So one interesting thing from here as well in the language is on the name. I know we've been waiting a while to know what this new entity is going to be called. It specifies that the term Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force means the task force established under the Department of Defense announcement on August 4th, 2020. That was the one that became AOI MSG. So it does look like the successor office to the UAPTF. They're really pushing for it to be the AOI MSG.
And I'll always go back just on the whole, the technology argument, just to look at both sides. Chris Mellon, who is someone, again, propaganda, that we put a lot of faith in what he says and the work he's done in the past. But he came out in an article and mentioned that these objects are clearly not Russian or Chinese, particularly Chinese, when a Chinese space rocket crashed in a rural providential area of China. And it landed on like a kind of piece of road, basically. And Chris Mellon made the point, it's clearly not these guys with this advanced technology, because look, the rockets are literally falling down on the land. Yet only a few weeks after that, there was a hypersonic missile tested from China that went apparently round the globe very, very quickly, which allegedly the US knew nothing about. So on one hand, you've got the technology being deemed, poor or not as good as they're making out. And then on the other hand, wow, they have some really advanced stuff. So it's always, I think, best to look at this with an open mind and an open, it could be this, it could be this. And until you've got more data, don't put all your eggs into one basket quite yet. But it's again, we've had this down period, haven't we, that we keep talking about now for a few months, and we saw the ramifications of that in terms of the social media chatter, and even on Reddit and other platforms, you can see the clamour for UFO news isn't there like it was in last year in May, June, July, August. I mean, if you're a podcaster, I'll be honest, like you see the spike in numbers when the task force report came out, and when Fox and CNN and NBC and Good Morning America and the Australian news are picking it up, and the German news, you see the numbers reflect in people's podcasts and YouTube channels and everything else. And as the year went on, probably after the J.J. Abrams stuff came out, and that kind of was the end of the crest of that wave. And as things started to die down, the general public, the people who have a passing interest, tend to fade away from the subject because, well, there was no alien bodies, no craft, no pictures, no videos, and they're kind of waiting on that next wave to come up. And I think what we're starting to see is the beginning of that next wave, that next piece of momentum, because as we go on, we're going to get those first reports, hopefully, what we're going to get in the background. There's going to be reports, like you say, though, whether we see the reports or not, or we see pieces of them, or whether we get those leaks that we like to get. We'll have to wait and see. But I think hopefully we're at the start of that news cycle coming back through. And I again would love to see particularly the US news picking this back up, carrying that baton, and then passing that on around the world. That hopefully this time again, the UK news picks it up, and the European news picks it up, and the African news picks up. You want to see it go around the globe, and people start to have those conversations, and the general public can kind of stir up that kind of passion again that we saw for it for a kind of short period last year. So that excites me. I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, anything to add to that one, Dan?
No, just I completely agree with you. It's going to go up and down and up and down in terms of what news we get. There is actual work to do, so it's not like there's a big load of paperwork that they can just chuck on the president's desk and go, "Here you go, here's everything." There are a number of things still going on in the background. We've got the DoD Inspector General report still due to come. That'll be about their investigation of handling UAP issue, and their handling towards Lue Elizondo as well, with his credentials and deleting his emails and things like that. They're both potentially big movers, so keep an eye out for those. We've got the legislation going through, which enables them to actually put the safeguards and tools in place to do this research properly and to actually be able to hold people to account for withholding that information. So we're at the very start of the conversation here, but it's the start of the kind of the official face of the conversation. And I think this is what Lue is getting at when he says in interviews that if people are a little bit impatient, they should go away for 5 years and come back, because there'll be a lot more information on the table to read through. I think you experienced the same thing as me, where we read about this all the time and we're always watching stuff to do with it, and every time you learn a little bit more, but then in 6 months you could have almost written a book with all the little bits that you learned over the previous 6 months. And I think that kind of mountain of stuff piling up is what Lou's getting at when he says, come back in 5 years and there'll be so much stuff for you to go through that it'll almost be too much.
100%. And to segue into what we're going to talk about next, we're going to tear through some little bits and pieces of news. One of the Twitter followers at Lyrical Yule Brynner asked us to cover a few different points, and the first one of those it comes on the back of what we've just talked about, though, the potential for UFO sightings over Ukraine and Russia, given they're now in, unfortunately, a war, or if you're the Russian military, a special military operation, but not to get political or talk about the war and all that kind of stuff as well.
There's enough special.
Yeah, there's enough going on in the world, and other people hear this stuff on the news, and for some people this will be a bit of an escape. But we'll address the UFO aspect of it. What might affect, though, what we've just talked about is the ongoing conflict with Russia and Ukraine, because that is dominating the headlines. Because now what it's done is knock COVID onto the back burner, which is still in the background. It's still there. There's still issues going on, but now the main story is Ukraine, Russia. So any UFO, UAP legislation that comes out stateside, and any bill it's a part of as well, there's all that military spending and everything else. It's potentially going to take a bit of a side seat to anything else. So we'll have to just wait and see. But anyway, as we were asked, a few things to cover as part of this breakdown was that potential for sightings in Ukraine and Russia. In a state of war, in a state of heightened tensions, what is going to be above the skies in Ukraine and over Russia and a lot of other places right now is probably a lot of that really, really advanced technology that does have potential for hypersonic speeds, or the radar jamming, all those different things. I'm not going to go in because someone will tear apart what I say and it's going to be wrong to your terminology wise. But there's probably going to be a lot of those really cool advanced special drones kicking about, and there's going to be a lot of mistaken sightings. There's been a few videos and pictures and stuff put online already, hasn't there, Dan, where people have went, oh, looks like a UFO. It could be, but again, I'm just very wary in a time where there's literally an active war situation. There's going to be a lot of stuff in the skies.
Yeah, 100%. I think that, one, there's almost an opportunity if people think they're being safe from elsewhere, they might relax in terms of defenses and things like that. You never know what's going on propaganda-wise, and it's just good to be very discerning at a time like this, especially when we got social media to spread stuff so quickly. It's what's the saying, that a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth gets its pants on. Then, I'm seeing, I've got a few videos sent I think they were like TikTok links to me, showing some advanced weaponry and things like that. And again, with a single source, we have to kind of go back to what Sean Cahill said. With a single source, it's really hard to kind of take these things at face value. And there's a lot going on in this conflict, and a huge loss of life that's tragic. And it's just, I don't know, like I usually don't mind kind of juggling the maybe UFO videos, but in a situation like this, I tend to put them down to just people exploiting the situation to get hits or views. We already saw it this week with Third Phase of the Moon, putting out a Tic Tac video that, if you haven't seen it, count yourself lucky. It was fake. But it took the internet about 12 hours to figure that out. And a lot of people picked it up and ran with it in that time.
Yeah, those videos, you're getting people, like you say, exploiting the situation with the different hashtags. And if you've got a UFO video you've made yourself, or just something that looks a little bit anomalous, you can stick it online with, hashtag UFO, hashtag UFO sighting, hashtag UAP, but now throw in hashtag Russia, hashtag Ukraine, and it has that exposure to a bigger audience as well. And like you say, it kind of blows up online. So, if anyone wants to send over anything, as always, I'm always happy to take a look at it and forward it on if it looks good, or people want me to kind of send it to other people to have a look at. But I would just tell people to be wary right now and just have a look at the comments normally underneath videos before you jump in and start retweeting or sharing and Instagram storying it, whatever you do, using the Bebo and the MySpace as the kids do these days. And as part of that, again, a lyrical Yul Brynner, that's really easy to say, wanted us to touch on interventions potentially around nuclear sites and weaponry. And it's always a really interesting conversation, and one that gets brought up daily, especially just now with the situation we're in, where people will talk about, would an advanced civilization, would a non-human intelligence interfere during a nuclear conflict? And I've seen some relatively well-known ufologists or UFO researchers on Facebook, I think it was, having quite a chat about, well, if they do launch nuclear weapons, we don't have to worry about it because they'll be shot out of the sky by these UAPs. And I'm a little bit like, I don't see the logic really behind that. I get they can apparently, allegedly, it looks like, turn them on and off at will. They've kind of messed about with these things at various nuclear sites around the world. But they didn't stop Hiroshima, and they didn't stop the Fukushima plant blowing up, the issue that was there. They didn't stop Chernobyl when those, levels were going off the chain. So there's nothing necessarily to say, and obviously I forgot to mention Nagasaki, but any other number of nuclear tests that go on around the world, we don't hear that much about, them stopping them. But I saw it was a potential rabbit hole, and I won't go too sideways here, but the other day where people were talking about, are a lot of these nuclear tests in the upper atmosphere and under the water to actually deliberately knock some UAPs out? And, but it was quite interesting, but that's another story for another time. But yeah, for me, there's not a whole lot to confidently say, yeah, they can launch the nukes, it's fine, they'll be shot out the sky by a load of Tic Tacs.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily think so.
We've got to remember that we don't know the visitor's intentions, and it's really hard to read. And anything that we do read it comes from a very human place for us. It's hard to think outside the box because everyone's human, and this is all we've ever known. When it comes to this stuff, I tend to think that it's kind of like parenting children. You don't want to do the thing for the kids. You want the kids to understand what they should do when you leave them to themselves, right?
Yeah.
Give them a sense of right or wrong. Stopping Hiroshima wouldn't have done that. You kind of need the tragedy to see how utterly devastating these weapons can be. And I look to someone like Stanislav Petrov, who was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces. And he played a key role in, I think it was in 1983. There was basically a false alarm incident, and he was the guy with his finger at the button.
Yes.
And he went against orders and did not launch. And it speaks volumes about the ability of one person to affect these huge things. And I think we've lost that idea. We think that one person can't affect things. And I mean, look at the work of Lue Elizondo. One person, he's affected this conversation a lot. And by not pressing that button, Stanislav really kind of went from a serviceman to someone who, in his later years, if you watch the documentary The Man Who Saved the World, he goes to America and he's shown one of the Minuteman IBM kind of silos that sits there, and he gets so angry discussing it. And this was a guy who was ready to put his life on the line for his country, and he's changed his morals so much from that experience that he hates the weapons and he thinks they're ridiculous. That kind of change on a human scale would be incredible for us, and it would be the harbinger of a new age of sharing technology and trusting each other, and we could reach for the stars in ways that we never have. I feel like the visitors would want that instead of to just keep babying us and going, oh yeah, we're going to stop Chernobyl for you because accidents happen. We've got to clean up our own mess.
If you could give everyone that astronaut experience, they all say when they go up and
the
see,
oversight over the effect, yeah,
and they can just see, wow, there's everything. There's everyone who ever was and ever will be just there, and it just changes them. And if you could give everyone that experience, who knows? But unfortunately, right now, there's around the world, everywhere, in various different places, different conflicts going on, unfortunately, and people are losing their lives, and not just men, women, and there's little children as well. And again, as a parent, that's horrible to see. But let's go on with the UFO.
It's definitely one of those. It's one of these moments in history that remind you that humanity isn't, we always talk about these Kardashev scales and, where we are in the Fermi paradox and, how far along are we there? Really, there isn't one measurement for humanity. Every country has its own level of development. Every people has its own level of development. And even the term I'm using, development, that's, my goal isn't the correct goal.
It's relative.
It's all relative to the life that I've lived and the experience I've had. And I think the sooner we appreciate the nuances of that over a planet-wide area, we'll get past these kind of what we refer to as the petty, greedy nature of humanity.
Well, someone who is relatively selfless, if not controversial himself online, is Joe Murgia, UFO Joe, because he does a lot of the great transcribing we've talked about. So again, check out at the UFO Joe, folks, because I like Joe and I like the work he does, and I appreciate it as someone who has to do a little bit of research now and again for a daft podcast I do. And we were asked to touch on Jim Semivan's recent comments. Now, if it's the comments I imagine it is, a couple of days ago, Joe had tweeted these from Jim Semivan's recent interview with Stuart Davies, and I'll just read you a couple of paragraphs here, folks, so you know what we're talking about. Jim Semivan said this: "People have died, over this, because the phenomenon isn't necessarily all good. There are terrible things that happen to people who have these experiences. I'm talking about the hitchhiker syndrome, things along those lines. It's not, I wouldn't say the majority, but there is a certain minority of people that have an extremely difficult time with this. We met one in our group, and it's constant. Not that I'm saying there's any kind of thing you have to fear. I mean, I don't think this is existential. Indecipherable part here, Joe said, we would be in really bad shape if it was. They do walk into this sometimes, particularly at Skinwalker. You walk into this and you don't realise what you're walking into. And then this thing attaches itself, and it might not be evil. It just might be completely agnostic or apathetic or even insouciant. Dan, is that I've never heard that word before.
Carry on. I'll look it up now. Go on.
Yeah, I'll carry on. Where it actually knows what it's doing, but it doesn't give a damn. So yeah, some interesting comments from Jim Semivan, someone who himself has mentioned in the past as an experiencer, and is still, along with his wife, Dan? Him and his wife are both being studied by a group. Yeah. So he's been very open, very vocal about those experiences, which I think, Dan, you mentioned before we hit record, can be quite frustrating, can't it? That there's someone who with that level of respect and level of work and the people he works with can just come out and say so much, and you just wish there was one person like that would come out and say everything, but NDAs, private contracts, work they do, confidentiality, just good human nature. There's things they don't talk about, and I get why that frustrates people, but I think it's pretty interesting Jim Semivan himself talking about the idea that this phenomenon doesn't necessarily have to be all good. It's again like
good and bad are just like social constructs, man. If you can't see me, I did the hippie, hippie sign in a sarcastic way, but it's true. Everything's relative.
I was trying to think on the top of my head about a similar example, and animal testing of medicines and products is horrible. but there have been benefits to certain aspects of humanity. Would the person doing the testing necessarily be classed as evil, doing what they're doing? Potentially not, but they're doing something pretty horrible to a life form, a creature that doesn't deserve to have what it's done to them. There's the potential that some of these experiences, this what's the word, this aspect of the phenomenon, the playing about with us,
Oh,
Joker
like a trickster.
trickster, that's the word.
Sure.
Yeah, the trickster aspect to the phenomenon is a higher intelligence just messing about with us. And when you look at, for example, the injuries Thomas Winterton and others have suffered from, if those are, or like Com Kelleher mentioning the cancers that people have got and people have passed away from, it's just potentially a side effect to something that they're not meaning to do it, but if it happens, it happens. And you don't know that it's just another intelligence alongside, whether it's alongside us or above us, whatever you want to say, is this interaction causes these kind of harmful effects. So it's interesting again to talk about that, and I think it's only common sense that this is where I don't necessarily believe or buy into the idea that there are some people who claim all these beings are love and light and they're so nice and they're here to protect us and have the best, the best intentions for us. But then on the other side, you've got people who they're all demons and demonic, they're all evil. We shouldn't get involved with it. I very much keep myself in the middle of that, and it's probably fair with our limited human understanding that there's a little bit of both involved in that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, firstly, so insouciant, yes, totally would. Showing a casual lack of concern. So for anyone listening, this is today I learned a new word. go use it in a sentence to someone and blow their minds.
So what was it? It was a
insouciant, showing a casual lack of concern. So
okay.
it would be summing up everything you've just said, basically.
So like when I give you a deadline to work towards something, you're insouciant about it, and it ends up late.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay.
Nicely done. I'll give you the
Thanks.
Scrabble points.
Yeah, thanks.
We just don't know about whether something is malevolent or benevolent or even understands those concepts. They might just be an inherently human thing. You look at insects and we wonder whether they have a sense of right or wrong or anything like that. And the truth is, we don't know. They might. It's hard to argue either way about the will of something else that we can't experience its life. But I know certainly humanity is in a moment right now where we're looking at our kind of unintentional effects on our environment and the environment, all around the world. We're experiencing that. We've done a bunch of things that have led to some very negative things for us that were completely unintentional. And some people knew, sure, but we have to live in it and deal with it anyway. Was it malevolent, benevolent? It's not really going to help us to figure that out, right?
100%. And that's why whenever I hear people talking about, we're on the verge of a huge paradigm shift as a species, I just can't see that, given, like you say, Dan, the relative development of nations and cultures and people's thinking, even within their own cultures, how different people are.
Yeah.
That's just not happening anytime soon, that there's going to be a global awakening. I mean, something might happen that we all have to experience, but I don't think that we're all going to ascend to a new dimension and higher state of consciousness. That's just not on the horizon. I don't know how else
So
to
it's safe
really
to
say
say if
that.
it happens, you're not coming then.
Probably not. I'll still be here podcasting about it and how disappointed I am. Everyone's gone, looking for a new co-host. So yeah,
I mean, that's nice of you to say that I would go. I'll do a show from over there. Why not?
Yeah, over there or down there, either one.
Yeah, as above, so below. That's what we'll call it.
Yeah, we were asked to touch on A Terror in the Sky. AterrorInTheSky.com is the website for the new documentary that is part of UAPX. Looks very well produced. There's no trailer yet. There's not much to cover on that one. We talked about it on the last breakdown. There's no updates yet. But again, I'll have Gary Voorhees back on the podcast if I'm sure he wants to come back on. I will speak to Gary to discuss that as and when the time comes. We were also asked to cover Nope, which is the new movie coming out from Jordan Peele. We won't go into too much movie chat here, folks. But
I'm so very excited.
Yeah,
so very, very excited for this one.
Yeah, this looks like it's going to be a horror type movie.
Yeah.
Where the antagonist is some sort of UFO, essentially. From what you see in the trailer, it's a bit mashed up at the moment. And it gives you flashes. There's what looks like some greys running about, potential Virginia-esque incident going on. But It's got the silence in the area before the UFO approaches. It's got all the animals going quiet. It looks really interesting, so I'm looking forward to seeing it.
What I love about the trailer is that it's given us so little that we can't define what the other thing in the trailer, the anomalous thing. So we've just got to call it a UFO. You know that Jordan Peterson is definitely going to play with that in the film. And I love his movies because he plays with expectation. Every single one almost feels like there are 2 or 3 films wrapped up, and depending on the reasons you're watching it, whether it's to kind of study the racial relations and what they're speaking about or what he's speaking about there, or whether you're just watching it for entertainment, there's a whole bunch of levels going on, and I'm excited to see what he uses the idea of the other for in that regard.
Yeah, and we'll put the links to the trailer in the description. Same with the link to the Terror in the Sky website and the George Knapp article as well. Just a heads up on the George Knapp article, it's unfortunately region locked to the US, so you'll have to use other means to look at that.
Proton VPN is a nice legal free means.
There
You
you
can
go.
download it on the iOS App Store or Android App Store. It's just a free VPN. Just download it, connect to the USA option, and you'll be able to just enter that News 8 News Now link and read it.
Awesome. Chase also asked us to cover on Twitter the recent idea that Lue showed a select group of podcasters classified videos, etc. And look, we're not going to go into that whole UFO Twitter controversy from last week. People saw enough of that. It was quite embarrassing, to be honest. But essentially, there was a rumor going about that Lue Elizondo had shown a group like some borderline what classified material. It turned into, I think, Dan, your word was like a game of telephone.
Yes.
And it was what was one thing turned out to be something totally different, and a whole load of people in the middle of it have embarrassed themselves with no need for it. And again, it's just unfortunately that sort of stuff that happens when people are desperate for content. Folks, I won't put out interviews for the sake of doing interviews. If there's no one there to interview, which in this game there always is, and if you're doing it right, there should be. But also, like these breakdowns, we won't just do them when there's nothing to talk about. There just wouldn't be one that week. And for whatever happened, a whole lot of controversy get stormed up, names get thrown about, accusations got made, and it blew up online. And you'll probably notice, like Dan and myself stay out of those conversations. We don't really get involved. We don't like and retweet and comment and stuff like that. It's just, again, it happened last year when we went to London and Lou came to meet us for lunch. We were in a really busy little bar restaurant. Lou wasn't sitting with a laptop or a gaming projector showing us classified briefings that he's had. There was literally people at the tables all around us while we were chatting. So that this is, again, I think what sort of happened. Dan, did you even hear anything more about this as to what actually?
So it was interesting because I know where it started and I know what it's become, and the rumors come back to me with some more details, and I'm just like, that is not true. As someone that knows how this rumor started, that this is a game of telephone. What happened was basically Lou showed us an article on the Sun website that contained a video. That video was spoken about and assumed by a bunch of people to be like this super secret video. It wasn't. It was on the Sun website. It's up on YouTube. Lou gave Disclosure Team a comment on it. Disclosure Team did an interview with the guy who filmed it. So there's nothing secret here at all. But for some reason, some people felt that they had to kind of say that and start causing waves in the community for some likes or something like that. But that's as far as I'll go. It's just nonsense, basically. We'll include the link to the video for you here just to show that it's really nothing classified or crazy.
Yeah, a few people asked in the Discord chat and on Twitter and stuff, do you guys know much more about this, and was there stuff being shown in the background? If there was, it certainly wasn't to us, and it sounds like it's just become a whole lot of nothing. So that's all there really is to say about it, and it's just disappointing. We stay out the drama, folks. Like, I've got enough to do on a day-to-day basis without getting involved in that kind of stuff, and there are a lot of great people doing a lot of great work online, a lot of great tweeting, blogging, podcasting, YouTubing, all that kind of stuff without the need for the nonsense that can go along with it. It's a fascinating subject, so you don't need the drama to be part of it.
It's really bizarre that some people think that this isn't crazy enough. So extraterrestrials visits Earth not interesting enough for you.
Exactly. So yeah, it seems to have come and gone, which is for the best.
Yeah, for sure.
Last couple of bits to touch on then, folks. Dan wanted to apologise, it says here, for for panicking people. Is that what it says?
About the show length, yeah. We hear you loud and clear. A lot of people got back in touch, many of them very passionately. Just saying, don't change the show length. A lot of people will watch 20 minutes and then come
Just
back.
just to clear up, this wasn't I was going to change the show length. Dan threw this out on a recording, and it was more from a point of view of should he cut down the videos to shorter lengths. So if I
That
record
was
like
it,
an
yeah.
hour or an hour and a half interview, should he release them in smaller chunks? And people almost unanimously were like, nope, nope, nope. That's what he was looking at in terms of analytics and
Yeah,
algorithms. And
absolutely.
off the back of that, though, what we're doing now is the monthly recap. If there comes a point where I have more time, I could do weekly shorter versions of the interviews and then longer form as well. I don't have the time for that sort of work just now. But what I can do is start to do monthly recaps where I've released a section of each interview to give people a little taster as to interviews they may have missed or not wanted to listen to or not been sure of, give you a little glimpse of what was in it, and then you can go back and listen to it if you want. That's what the recaps are going to be for as well. So, but yeah, that was all it was, folks. So it was just looking at the analytics and how people might digest their content. We're always trying to kind of keep it relative for everyone as well. And yeah, and kind of finishing up, folks, couple of announcements. You can, of course, support the podcast via patreon.com/that UFO podcast. Or if you're on the YouTube more often than not, click on YouTube, you'll have a join option. And again, it's like the price of a coffee to join up and support the podcast via YouTube. And you get early access to interviews, ad-free viewing, all that kind of good stuff, just in a visual format, as opposed to what you would get as part of Spotify if you search That UFO Podcast Premium. And same on the Apple link as well. You get a 2-week free trial with early access and ad-free listening too. You also get access to the Discord chat, so just drop us a message if you need into that. But again, it's part of those kind of paid subscriptions as a little something back and a thank you, folks. Anything you'd like to see us record content-wise, please let us know. We've got a whole list of ideas coming up for shows, and it has probably taken as longer than we expected with Dan being away and coming back and myself having the tech issues to get back in a rhythm and flow with everything, but we've got there now, I think, and we'll be getting those shows.
That's our band name if we ever start performing at conferences. Rhythm and Flow.
It's a good rhythm and flow. Yes, a good name for a band. We also will be recording the Tom DeLonge Part 3 in the next week, hopefully. I've not said that to Dan yet, but that's...
Are we doing a 2.5 with listener feedback from Part 2?
Yes, a few people had sent stuff over. There will be a 2.5 as well. If you have listened to the Tom DeLonge Part 2 and want to send over any comments, any thoughts, or any questions for us to answer, please feel free. And even if it was something that Part 3 is going to cover, Dan, where did we leave off?
I think we were basically just going to start getting into that core story about the beliefs that Tom holds about the phenomena and just talking about them a bit more in depth, because there was a lot of them and they were pretty controversial.
Atlantis.
Atlantis, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about those. So anything at all you want to message, send it over to UFO UAP AM@gmail.com or tweet it or whatever, and I'll put it together. But those will be getting recorded soon. Guest wise, I've got, hopefully, I'm still waiting on a date, but Chris Rutkowski, whose book Canada's UFOs Declassified is coming out at the end of March, and he'll be doing interviews then for that. I'll just announce it now, I don't mind. Shane Ryan, who was part of Ross Coulthart's documentary in Australia, who done a lot of investigating and reporting on the Westall School incident, is going to be coming on the podcast. That's something I've been trying to arrange for quite a while. Very excited to speak to Shane. He's looking forward to coming on. So early days, if you have any interest in Australian UFOs or the Westall incident particularly, email UFOUAPAM@gmail.com with questions for Shane, but we'll be covering the Westall incident and some other bits and pieces within that interview. Very much looking forward to it. I've also got to mention, just in case you hadn't seen, the interview with Lue Elizondo has been moved to April 23rd. Essentially, I was happy to move it to be out the Lue's media run at the minute. He's doing a lot of great interviews, and we'll tell you about one of those in just a second. That's coming up tonight, or last night, or last week, whenever you listen to this. But I can get a little bit longer with Lue if I wait, and that's why I'm going to wait till the 23rd of April. It benefits you, it benefits me, it makes for a better interview, and I'd happily wait the extra time anyway. On that, Lue Elizondo and Sean Cahill are both on Theories of Everything with Kurt Drymungo this evening. Very much looking forward to that. I don't think it's unfair to say, Dan, given this will go out afterwards, we've had a little look at the questions, shall we just say, and we've got an idea of what's coming up, folks. And I can promise you there shouldn't be a whole lot of old ground being covered. Remember, Kurt's got a very different audience to us, a much bigger audience as well, maybe a bit more mainstream, a bit more science-based. So there will be some stuff kind of covered, but there's a lot of really decent questions in there. I can guarantee you that, which hopefully get some really good answers from both Lou and Sean. Sean's very, very underrated when it comes to interviews and what he talks about and how he talks about it as well. And
yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to add in there that because Andy's just explained, or you've just explained, I should say, I was talking to the audience then, that you've got an interview coming up with Lou. If something isn't asked in the Theories of Everything interview, piggyback off it. Let us know what you want us to pick up on, and you know, a lot of us podcasters talk behind the scenes, and none of us like repeating things. So help us help you, and tell us what you'd like to see covered, and we'll try our best.
100%. And also, before the end of March, we want to record another AMA. You might have seen on the free feed yesterday, I dropped our first ever AMA. We recorded almost about 1 year ago. Slight audio crackle on my side, folks, but it's not too bad. It was an issue at the time. But there's loads of those recorded that are over on the Patreon and Apple. And I know you might hate all that, paying for stuff, but it's just a little bit of something back for those who do choose to support the podcast in that way. It's on there for free if you like it. Sign up to any of the podcast streams and you can access those sorts of shows. But if you want to get involved in the AMA, again, tweet us, Instagram it, email UFOUAPam@gmail.com as always, and we'll get those in there as well. Any questions for myself and Dan, and we'll chat through quite casually and answer those. It's always a kind of fun time.
Definitely. I spoke with Vinny as well, and we're going to be Phenomenology, the documentary from Colombia, comes basically May 1st. So at the end of April, we're going to try and do the AMA for Colombia, and we'll be presenting all the videos we kind of took while we were out there. Not kind of, spoiling the documentary, but giving you guys a sense of what we did out there, what you can expect from the documentary. That comes out just a few days later. I think that'll be interesting. Andy will be with us asking us questions and kind of providing the audience voice and holding our feet to the fire as well. So I'm excited for that one.
100%. Dan should be worried. And the last one, you might have seen the live listener call-in is going to be on Saturday, the 26th of March. That's at 10 p.m. UK. If we're right, though, because of the clocks changing, and Dan, that means it's going to be...
I mean, it's still 10 p.m. UK.
10 p.m. UK,
that will
but...
be later.
Yeah, but it's going to be 3 p.m. Pacific and 6 p.m.
Yes.
Eastern.
Good shout.
That's the ones, yeah.
Yes.
55% of the audience is US based, so there you go. Important to get that there.
70% of statistics are made up on the spot. Is that one?
Yeah, that one's a lie. But yeah, so there you go, folks. Yeah, that'll be on the 26th of March. Live listener call-in would be great if people get involved and come on. There'll be a link. You can join us, talk to us, answer a question, get off and let someone else come on. But people have already started sending me over. I say people, I've got two voicemails that they won't make the live show, but they want us to play their call. It can be a video or it can be audio based. We'll play it on the live and Dan and I will answer it on there for you. So if you want to do that, email it over, tweet us, get in touch if you're not too sure, but it'd be great to have as many people involved with that as possible. Dan, good little breakdown there, good recap. It's kind of got me up to speed with where everything is.
No James Webb update this time because the mirrors are still aligning.
It's still up there.
There's a good example of no update because nothing much has happened.
Yeah, but by saying that, you've kind of updated everyone, so he's still kind of
true. Very short update. Damn.
But that's it. But yeah, listen, folks, thank you very much for listening. Thanks for checking out. On Monday, the 14th of March, you will see the Daniel Otis interview. Journalist and writer. His article on Vice.com is really good on the 20 years of declassified UFO documents. Check it out. Really interesting to hear a journalist perspective diving into this topic. And even Daniel, as you'll hear, is still trying to find out where that line is. How far can he go? How far can he discuss? Keeping things reputable but also relevant to the conversation as well. So
very interesting one, that one. I was with Dan. I love his work. Obviously I love his name as well. But I didn't have a good read on where that line was for him and how much of a skeptic versus debunker versus that kind of scale. And And yeah, I think he's an asset after that interview, and he's a really intriguing guy, and I'm going to be following his work, and I'm excited for everyone to listen.
Definitely. Again, folks, thank you for listening, and we'll speak soon. That is all for this week's show. Thank you very much for listening. Please remember to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. You can like, retweet, and subscribe. That would all be very much appreciated. The shows are being uploaded onto YouTube as we speak more and more. You can sign up at patreon.com/That UFO podcast to access the shows ad-free as well. Please get in touch on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, That UFO podcast. Of course, on Twitter, it's at UFO UAPAM. And again, folks, as always, keep looking up. You never know what you might see.
It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer, more like a hubcap designed by Chaucer, a little Baroque and quite steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Folk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue. I don't think he expected me to see his ass, but I'd had some champagne and smoked a little around. Meditative game of state full on meta. I can't imagine how it could have been any better. I got to the top of the stairs and there he was. Like, you awake? I was about to abduct you, cuz. I jumped back and nearly kissed myself, and I climbed out the window after the elf, and I woke up in my bed and there was something on my head and everything was weird and everything was red. And I called out to my boys. They thought this was noise. They thought it was a dream. They thought it was my toys. They thought it was my problems, and they think I should seek therapy, and I don't know what to do because it doesn't really scare me. If you really want to know who I think they'd be, I think it's you and me and us and we and him and her and that and she and that thing over there and what's that, Jake? But if we're being serious, open your mind, consider your heart, consider time, consider your space, consider your lies, consider your life,